Hi, my name is Adrian Solorzano. I'm here cooking for DK Restaurants. And today we're going to be making butternut squash risotto. You can also substitute pumpkin for the risotto. And yeah, let's get started. So you got some Hawaiʻi mushrooms. So first you want to take the bottom off. That's the more fibrous, tough part to eat. And I just slice it however I like it. Not too big, not too small, enough to get a nice meaty texture on it when you cook it. Slice it 3 times down, and then I just kind of like to chop it at a random angles. Toss it on the sheet pan. So what we're gonna do now is first some olive oil. I like to put them together to get them all, or toss it in a bowl, but this is also fine. And then once it's nice and covered, we're gonna season it with some salt and pepper. And then also we're gonna do the same for the tomatoes. Covered or tossed in oil and seasoned with salt and pepper. So then we go and we put in the oven. The oven's currently at 375. We put it in there for about 10 to 15 minutes. Fan on if you have a convection oven. If you don't, it's about, I would go 400 for the same amount of time until tender. So next step for the butternut squash or pumpkin, same thing. These are pretty hard vegetables, so pretty much I just go straight down. I'm gonna cut it in half before I roast it so it cooks evenly. And so I'm gonna cut them into smaller pieces so they all cook at the same amount of time. And then the part with the seeds, you seed it out with a spoon. Just kind of scrape it. And don't worry about peeling it, because when it's cooked, it's easier to just peel that skin off. Next, I'm just gonna toss it in the bowl with some olive oil, salt and pepper. Again, I do olive oil first to coat it, so the salt and pepper really sticks on there. Oh, where's the olive oil? Here it is. Not too much. You don't want to fry it in the oven. Just kind of toss it, get it coated. Then you just season with a little salt and pepper. For the pan, I like to put a little bit of parchment paper. That way it's easier when it's cooked. It's not going to stick when you're pulling it out. Just kind of arrange it however you like. This one's going to take a little longer to cook. If you have a convection oven, maybe about, I always go 20 minutes, and then I just keep checking the tenderness of it. Once it's completely tender, then you should be good. But if you don't have one, I would go 420 for about 25 minutes, and then keep checking it until it's tender. So now that they're out of the oven and roasted, nice and soft, I can touch it. I waited a few minutes before I touched it because it's hot. Don't want to burn yourself, and you can just peel the skin right off. It's okay if it gets some caramelization, still gonna be tasty. Or you can always cut that out. You could use your knife, a paring knife, or just a regular chef's knife. I don't want too much of that, so I'm just gonna take that out. It's nice and soft. And then I'll do that for the rest of it. See, this one's like perfect. And now I go in the blender. And if you want to use a spoon, you can. I just kind of, when it has really thin skin, it's easy to just scoop it out with a spoon also. Get all that meat. do this one too. One thing I like to do is save it and just dice it up and put some on top of the risotto afterwards for more texture. So this piece I'll just kind of dice it up, save it for later. So next, after we've roasted and peeled the squash or the pumpkin, same steps go with the pumpkin. We're gonna blend it up to make the puree to add to the risotto. That should be good for now. You don't want to do it all in one batch. It will get too chunky. It won't be smooth. So what I like to add on is to the butternut squash puree is the butternut, roasted butternut squash, some kosher salt and pepper. No pepper. Just kosher salt is good. Use kosher salt because it's not as strong as the iodized salt, so it's a lot more difficult to over season something where it becomes salty. And then just add a little bit of water, just enough to get the blender rolling. And then you just kind of want to blend it little by little because it is hot, so it could kind of explode on you. You gotta be careful. So if that happens because the squash is kind of chunky, I just kind of grab a spatula or even a spoon, just kind of mix it around in there, and then you go back. You can always add a little bit more water. And little by little, you want really the blades to get trapped in with everything. Wait till the blade stops. And mix it again. Butternut squash should be pretty sweet, especially after roasting. So you don't gotta. You taste it with a little bit of salt, and then when it's nice and pureed, you wanna see that. I just transfer it to a container. And just pour it in there. You don't want to cover it or refrigerate it right away because it'll spoil. But we put it in there, let it cool down, and save it for later. This also makes really good baby food. And then all I do now is repeat with the rest of the squash. And butternut squash puree is ready to go for execution. So been about 10 minutes. These are nice and tender. And tomatoes, you want to not touch them until they cool down, because then you're just gonna make a puree out of them, and that's looking good. Then you just let them cool. So next step is our risotto. This is kind of the halfway finished product. What we do with it is you get your risotto rice, arborio rice, and then in a pan you just add, well, first you warm up your dashi. You have that warm also. Warm it up. Then you, in the hot pan, you add butter, whole butter, onions, garlic, shallots, and your risotto, and you mix that by itself until it's nice and brown and nutty. You're gonna be able to smell it. Salt, a little bit of salt to take out some of the flavor. Then after that, you add some white wine to it. Deglaze it with white wine. You let that reduce till it's almost dry, and then you start adding your broth, whatever it might be, veg stock. We use dashi because it's really flavorful, but you gotta be careful because it might be salty if you add too much dashi. And then you keep cooking it. What we do here is, since we run it in a restaurant, we put it in a sheet pan, let it cool off, and cool it down, and then have it ready for service. And then here are the rest of the ingredients that go in there. So we can pick it up from here. So basically what I do first is heat up my pan. Bear with me, I don't know exactly how much kernels of rice you're gonna have. Just kind of put it in there. Break it down, break it apart a little bit. Add a little bit of dashi. Don't add too much broth at this point because you're gonna add some of the puree, which will make it even more, a bit saucier, a bit looser. So you don't want to smash the grains of rice, but you do want to kind of not have them stick together. Once it's a bit warm, then I go to add the rest of the ingredients, which would be, I like to just go with the butternut squash puree or the pumpkin puree, whatever you preferred. Just kind of put that in there. Then I get some butter. And it's all pretty much, now you're just making it into a nice thick consistency. I add sambal for a little bit of a balance. Some Parmesan cheese. That also adds saltiness, so be careful. So you get the salt, but you don't really need to add it. Once this is nice and smooth, and the texture is what I want it to be, which is smooth but not cooked all the way. You want it al dente. So now it's pretty fast. Now there, I add the lemon juice. Fresh lemon juice is best, but whatever you have to give it balance is good. And then once that's done, you come and you're ready to plate. So if it's this color, you can always taste it. And if you want more butternut squash, you can add to it. I like to have the risotto really a bit loose. That way it plates a little easier, but you get more butternut squash puree. The reason we don't add the butternut squash puree at the beginning is because it does have sugars, natural sugars in it, and it might burn it, you know, so you want to wait to the end. That's why we puree it, cook it separate. So now that it's there, if you like it thick, it's fine. If you like it a bit thinner, it's okay too. I like it at a medium consistency. And then I just kind of give them 3 spoonfuls. Spread it out a bit. See, now the longer you let it sit, the thicker it'll get. Okay, now I gotta do the shrimp. So next step is the shrimp. We use 812 shrimp, peeled and deveined, head off. I like to take the tail off because I just like to eat it fast. So kind of cut into 3s, nice big chunks. That way you have some bite and you're not just eating chopped up shrimp. And I always like to season before you cook. Again, kosher salt. And since it's kosher salt, it might seem like a lot of salt, but it's really not going to be too much. Then get the pan at medium heat. Let it sit, let it get hot, let it get warm. A little bit of oil. Once the oil is running, you know the pan was hot. Well, at the beginning, I like to start on high heat, just to get the nice sizzle, caramelization on there. Not that they're all seasoned. Just kind of carefully just drop them in. Kind of just, since they're chopped up, just kind of chunky, just kind of, you're not gonna get, you just make sure they cook evenly. What you don't want is to get the pan too hot where the oil burns and it all tastes like burnt oil. If you see a big flame, then that's no good. It's kind of low. Oh, see, you don't want that. I always like to, you can deglaze it with white wine, or I just do water. Just to steam it a little bit. And honestly, that's all you gotta cook since it's so small. You just kind of let it go a little bit. It doesn't take long. Once you see the color, you don't want to overcook it, it'll get rubbery. So now that it's cooked, I like to add my mushrooms in there. These have already been roasted. And then I'm ready to plate. And then we just kind of put a different, spread it out on the plate on top of the risotto. So Then we add our tomatoes. Again, you don't want to move them too much because then they become mush. Put them on the... So what I like to go for is for almost every bite to be the same from the first bite. So I try to spread it out so every time you spoon it up, you get the same flavors, same textures. And then here's the butternut squash that we had before. It's gonna give it even more texture, more butternut squash or kabocha or pumpkin flavor that you want. And the last of this dish is a little bit of olive oil. Olive oil always helps. And the garnish. You can use any kind of garnish, microgreens or fresh small herbs. We have some, what is this, mizuna, I think? Some red leaf lettuce. We do green. Make it fancy. And I also chiffonade some green onions. The only thing with the garnish is you have to be careful which herbs, because the herbs that you put on top, if they're too strong, they're going to change the flavors of the dish. And that's the dish. Shrimp and butternut squash risotto.